Right.
And then you'll moderate when we're here. They'll sit where they are.
The other thing I can do.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Matt Roy, the Assistant Provost and Director of the Leduc Center for Civic Engagement here at UMass-Dartmouth. I want to welcome you to our 5th Annual Civic Engagement Summit. I'm going to usher you through today's event, a special person in my life and in the audience here today, a person who has dedicated her life to serving others less fortunate than she is. She is also my sister and the benefactor of the Leduc Center for Civic Engagement, Jeannie Leduc. We're also really fortunate to be blessed with the company of some of our younger members in our community. And so we have about 8 students from Durfee High School. I'd like them to stand up and be recognized. Annual Civic Engagement Summit. And in years past, we focused on topics like social capital, asset-based community development, big citizenship, and service as a solution. This year, we've come to the realization that to make a real difference in our community, what we need to do is focus our efforts more on the school as a hub for the community. And so our focus is on university-assisted community-based schools, and we're very fortunate to have Ira Huckabee from the University of Pennsylvania, who's been doing this work for about 28 years in West Philadelphia as our keynote speaker. Before we get the day started, though, I'd like to welcome our Provost, Alex Fowler, who we welcome all. Alex is the Provost, which for those of you who don't know is our Chief Academic Officer. So he is second in command here and has a very big job. Before becoming Provost, he was the Associate Provost for Graduate Studies and Research here at UMass-Dartmouth and has also served as the Chair of our Mechanical Engineering Department. So please join me in welcoming Alex Fowler.
Thank you all very much for coming. Of course, this has been a great event for a number of years. Always exciting to have it here. We're so proud to host it. But this year, I would say we're particularly thankful. This has been a really hard week for us on the campus and for the whole state of Massachusetts, I would argue, for the last 2 weeks. And certainly great for us to have you here to join us in this activity. The more positive energy we can get on this campus, the more people coming around to participate with us and in our vision for how to move forward in a bright and hopeful way, the better. So I really do appreciate your joining us today. Thank you. I also particularly want to recognize the support that we've gotten from many members of the community, but particularly from our sister campuses, the other UMass campuses, and I really appreciate Chancellor Motley's coming today as a sign of the strength that the UMass system has and how much they support us. I know his campus is facing challenges equal to our own, so it means a lot to me that you join us today. Thank you, Chancellor. You're welcome. All right, now on to the cheerier, more regular stuff. Welcome to the University of Massachusetts-Dartmouth and the 5th Annual Civic Engagement Summit. Through our Civic Engagement Summits, over 1,000 people have come together to discuss important issues bridging the university and the community. Today's gathering once again brings together to strengthen the social fabric of our community, region, and the Commonwealth. Civic engagement is a collective process designed to improve the quality of life for all. Today's dialogue is one step in that process. It is a step we take together consciously to improve our communities. The focus of this year's discussion is on university-assisted community-based schools. We know that in the South Coast, our educational attainment levels lag behind those of the rest of the state, and that our dropout rates are problematically high. We also know that educational attainment is the primary long-term strategy for community and economic health. Our keynote speaker, Dr. Ira Huckabee, assisted Chancellor Grossman in developing a university-assisted community-based school in Miami. He is a recognized leader in these endeavors and is committed to helping us form new university school partnerships here in the South Coast. For the 2nd year in a row, UMass-Dartmouth was recognized as being one of the top 15 universities in our country for community engagement and service learning by the President's Higher Education Honor Roll. This did not happen by accident. It is a testament to the strength of our community partnerships, the creativity of our faculty who design challenging learning experiences that benefit community and the resolve of our students to see those projects to fruition. We are very proud of the 192,000 hours of service that our students have performed last year, but even more proud of the learning that it produced and the impact it had on the community. 2/3 of the class of 2012 graduated with at least one service learning experience. We think these efforts will be even more impactful if we focus them on our school partnerships. Thank you for participating in today's dialogue. Our university is proud to help foster these discussions and looks forward to working with you to build healthier communities and a stronger Commonwealth.
Thank you, Provost Fowler. Now, I want to make sure that we not only have a productive day, but we start off on a light note and continue to sail on that tack. And so I hope that you humor me in my attempt at a little bit of levity here. Now, if you're not from a place like Fall River, New Bedford, West Philly, or the Bronx, don't try this because we'll chew your head off. But if you are from a place like Fall River, like me, you can give it a shot. And I trust when I'm done with this, you'll see how it's germane to our conversation. But here goes. And the accent is critical to this. Growing up, and this will be a trip down memory lane for a lot of you folks who happen to be from Fall River and New Bedford. Growing up, when you greet someone or be greeted by someone, it was a typical phrase, and that phrase acknowledged the importance of the matriarch in terms of keeping the family together, but also the importance of like the financial viability of the family. So here goes. Hey, how's your mother? Your father working? Now, when you get a little older and your parents have passed on, and your wife is the assistant superintendent in the Fall River schools, this is how that statement morphs. Hey, how's Franny? She like her job? And my response is almost standard. I say, yeah, she loves her job. In fact, she's so committed to the Fall River schools, she needs to be committed. So implying that there's some padded room for her waiting at Butler Hospital. Frankly, when I think about these partnerships that we're going to talk about today, universities and schools coming together to try and make a real difference in our community, we need to have that level of commitment. But we need to be committed to the partner. We need to look at the needs of the partner first and foremost, and the results, which will be increased educational attainment levels, decreases in our dropout rate, things like that, will come secondarily. So we focus on the partnership, we serve the partner's needs first, and we're going to make a real difference in our community. But frankly, in order for these partnerships to work, we need to be so committed that we need to be committed. Now we're going to segue a little bit into the program. By the way, thanks for laughing at that. I didn't question if you did. We're going to segue a little bit into the program now, and I have the good fortune of introducing Superintendent Dr. Bob Baldwin from the Fairhaven Public Schools. And what he's going to do is he's going to moderate a discussion with university chancellors and presidents and the superintendent of the Fall River schools. They're going to give some examples about best practices in partnership, and then hopefully we'll have a discussion with the rest of the audience. Dr. Baldwin has been superintendent of the Fairhaven Public Schools since 2005. Prior to that, he was a teacher for a good long spell and also served as a principal. He understands what it takes to develop these partnerships. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Bob Baldwin.
Here. I brought up my cough prevention, which who knows if it'll help or not, but I apologize in the beginning if I do have a coughing spell, but I've had that going on. At this point in time is I think I'm going to introduce all 4 esteemed members and then talk about the rules and the format and then move on and get out of the way. So at this point in time, I'd like to have the following people come forward, and if you could just have them come up, and then we can hold their applause, and then we can applaud when they all come up here. But if we could have Admiral Richard Gernon, the President of Mass Maritime Academy, Dr. J. Keith Motley, Chancellor of UMass-Boston, Dr. John J. Sprague, President of Bristol Community College, and Meg Mayo Brown, Superintendent of Schools for the Fall River Public Schools. If you could come up and sit behind me here, that would be great. If we could give a quick round of applause to our esteemed colleagues. Again, I will introduce them briefly. They will have, as a format, again, I get to play, I guess, referee umpire as a moderator. And I always look at big contests with big esteemed colleagues that are here saying, what is the role of a referee or an umpire in a big contest? It's to be unknown and unheard. So if I do my job well today, you'll never remember me. I will, and it's even more fitting that I've now been put off the podium off to the side and in a lower spot. So my job today is to create a format, to moderate the discussion. There is a microphone in front of each of the colleagues that will be talking about university school partnerships. And what I'd like to do is the format and the rules of the game are that each participant will be given 6 to 8 minutes to share 2 or 3 examples of university school partnerships which they have found effective. Once they're done with their 6 to 8 minutes, cell phone to time, and then I'll interject, we will then have a set of possible follow-up questions from yours truly, and then we want to provide opportunity for the audience to please engage and ask questions and learn from this experience. So again, we are very honored to have Admiral Richard Gernon, Dr. Keith Motley, Chancellor of UMass-Boston, Dr. Sprague, the President of Bristol Community College, Meg Mayo Brown, the Superintendent of Fall River Public Schools. Has there been a pecking order of who would like to do the first 6 to 8 minutes? Okay. All right. Meg Mayo Brown, you are on. So.
The only woman up there.
So ladies first. You know, I was just complaining to Matt that he sat me at a table full of men, and now I'm on a panel full of men.
That's a bad thing.
No, it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. So my pleasure to be here, and I'm always so excited to be able to talk about Fall River Schools, and in particular this morning to talk about the partnerships we've had with UMass-Dartmouth. And I'm also going to take the opportunity to talk about an upcoming potential partnership with Bristol Community College around launching the area's first early college high school in Fall River to give students the opportunity to earn 60 college credits before they graduate high school. So that's very exciting work that I'll talk about from it. I won't take 6 to 8 minutes. So a couple of things in terms of having a partnership with UMass-Dartmouth. Let me just set a little bit of context about Fall River, and in particular Fall River schools. And I want to shout out to our Durfee students. Thanks for being here this morning. So Fall River, I would say our biggest chunk of work right now is creating a college-going culture, right? So Fall River is a very proud community built upon the hard work of many who worked in the mills to support their families. Those jobs are clearly gone. It's very difficult now to be able, as we all know, to support a family with a high school education. So as we do our work in the school system, it's very important to honor the hard work that created our city while being very explicit with students that they must go to college. They must start their journey through post-secondary education upon graduating high school. Now imagine this, Fall River, there are about 14% of adults in Fall River have a bachelor's degree. We have one of the highest unemployment rates in the state. So those are the challenges that we face, but it's also an opportunity for promise and hope that we can create better opportunities for our students upon graduation. In 2008, our dropout rate was one of the second highest in the state, second only to Lawrence. Our dropout rate was 12.5%. Now we are down to 4.9%. Good job. And that good job is really a credit to the community, and there are many Fall River educators in the audience, and it's as a result of their hard work, along with the community's work, along with the partnerships that we have with higher education that help us create this college-going culture and help us reduce the dropout rate. Meanwhile, while the dropout rate is consistently going down, we have this great trajectory of graduating high school. So in 2008, our graduation rate was about 56%. We're now up to about 79% for Durfee High School, and we are on the heels of the state average. Again, a community effort and focus on staying in school, graduating high school, and going off to post-secondary education. Because of the way that the state now can capture student data, we know that 60% of our kids who graduated in 2011 are sitting right now in post-secondary education classrooms. That's huge for us. So sort of getting back to the partnership that we have with UMass-Dartmouth, it's occurred in a variety of ways. I would say, we were talking yesterday, it's organic. It happens as a result of really principals reaching out to UMass-Dartmouth that they have a need, or Bristol Community College, whether it's mentors for students or for the JET program, which I love the JET program, and that's a teacher training program that's resulted in training our paraprofessionals to be teachers in the system. So whether it's teacher training or student mentoring, these partnerships are assisting our community-wide goal of creating a college-going culture, and we're very proud to have those kinds of partnerships. So I think I'm going to sort of close out with that, but also talk a little bit about the huge potential to do even more, whether it's with UMass-Dartmouth or Bristol Community College. So I want to just close on the notion of an early college high school in the city where, again, kids can graduate high school with 60 college credits, and we're working through that process with creating an innovation school that will take 100 7th graders, 100 8th graders as it opens in September, and see them through with a strong wraparound support, because what we know in Fall River is that we need to support our kids through social emotional learning along with their academic learning. So if we can create these wraparound supports for kids starting at the very early elementary level all the way through high school, we know we're going to see strong success. Thank you.
I think I can build on what the superintendent has been talking about. I did want to say, I never talk about civic engagement without talking about service-learning. Some of the people at Bristol get a little tired of hearing me say it. I've been saying it for 13 years now, and longer and before that elsewhere. But I don't know if it's even grammatically correct anymore to have the hyphen between service and learning, but it is certainly pedagogically correct to connect directly the learning with the service. And civic engagement is a common term now. But we don't want to lose track of our mission to educate students. And I always boast about the holistic experience at BCC. And this outside the classroom as well as inside is important learning situations for our environment, for our students. So we have been working, and I want to give a shout out myself to Professor Mary Zom, who is in the audience, and Director Jen Boulay, and some of our students are here, and Associate VP Mike Vieira. We've been working to move service learning, as we started with service learning, now it's civic engagement, to make it a graduation requirement at Bristol Community College. And there are certain pushbacks, and there's administrative, bureaucratic obstacles, if you will, or hurdles that we need to overcome. So my strategy, don't tell anyone, but my strategy is to kind of move through certain programs where it's almost, it's already being done. Nursing and allied health, those are natural places for service learning. Early childhood, some of the reading courses we have and whatnot, they all fit, and they're all doing them already. So we can say that while it's not a formal requirement, we're already doing it, so let's make it a formal requirement and move on to the other programs as well. So that's certainly the plan. The idea when I started long ago was to, in education to produce good citizens who are informed, and that was the goal. But since I started way back in the Watergate era and all the things that have happened past that, the goal, I've changed the goal. It's to produce well-informed citizens who can make ethical choices. And I think that's very important, and that's an important role that civic engagement plays in that holistic experience at BCC. By the way, you notice everybody introduced people from the universities, and no one said college or school system. So we're here, and at Little Bristol, we're the largest higher education institution undergraduate in southeastern Mass. Did you know that? 12,000 undergraduates. Larger than some other people you might think. We're in a great position to form that bridge between what Superintendent Brown was saying about growing a college population and moving on to the university, the great University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth, and Bridgewater State University and UMass-Boston, absolutely. So we want to play that role and create these pathways. And as the superintendent spoke about, the pathways, these pathways already exist. We have dual enrollment, where students can take concurrently high school courses and college courses, and they work for both. Another very important, one of the programs that we're working with is the Gateway to College. Now, gateway is a term that's familiar to us in Massachusetts, but this gateway is the real gateway, gates. Okay, they're the people that get our attention, and with the superintendent's great cooperation, we have, she spoke about the dropout rate, which is dwindling, and we're making better progress even with them together as we work with the school system, and that is this Gateway to College recovers dropouts from the public schools. We bring them in, we give them dual enrollment courses so they accumulate enough courses to resurrect their high school career and degree, and at the same time accumulate some college courses. I was told that this graduation season, 15 Fall River dropouts will be graduating, and I hope to attend that graduation. And 15, we're also doing it in New Bedford, and 15 more in New Bedford are also going to graduate now. These were dropouts that have been recovered. So that 4% will be even lower, Superintendent Brown. Another, quickly, just another couple of programs we do. We deal with People Incorporated, with working with little ones, and also working with parents in parental instruction, if you will. And that's through our service learning, through courses and non-credit activities that we do in connection with People Incorporated, a very important part of the community. The other, excuse me, the other is the Children's Museum in Greater Fall River. That has been coming, is now in full bloom, and our students have worked not only in arranging the Children's Museum through the artwork and sculpture and early childhood program, but also working with the children through service learning activities when they come to the Children's Museum. So a way to embed service learning into the culture of the college as well as the community is through service learning and civic engagement. And we're very proud of our partnerships, and we want them not only to continue but to mushroom, so that it's part of the common core here in our communities. The superintendent mentioned it, but I'm sorry to leave with a down note, but the levels of educational attainment, the levels of literacy in our general area, not just Fall River, but all throughout southeastern Mass, I take that as a personal responsibility. It's abysmal. Both of them are abysmal. And I take it as a personal, it's my job to fix that. And in 13 years, I haven't been able to fix it, but we have made improvements. And I think that civic engagement is one other way to make great improvements in those terrible situations in our region. Thank you very much. Yeah.
I think it's a perfect segue into Dr. Motley from college, now to UMass-Boston.
First of all, good morning. I want to really say to this campus that I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to be at my second home today. And I'm so grateful to you for how you've handled this week and how we together will move forward as a community. And thank you for allowing me to come here today to sort of be energized by you, by being with all of my colleagues. One who told me I need to get a spit shine on my booth because it's sort of like a little dog. Now, we're so proud in Boston that we have the opportunity to serve in a city that gives us so many chances to take the mission of our institution and use it to impact lives every day. About 4 years ago, there was a front page article in the Globe that had all of the institutions in the Boston area very upset because it talked about what we weren't doing well, which was not graduating students from Boston's public schools in a way that would make any of us proud. While 77% of those students were actually graduating from from high school, about 35% of them were going on to college and graduating in 4 years. So when they did the list on the front page, it included a whole lot of us. Those of us that serve as university or college leaders or superintendents or any one of you in this room knows that if we don't do 100%, we're upset. So when people tell us that it's 60% or 70%, or they try to make you feel like 80% is okay, we still go home lamenting those 20% that were a challenge. And so the mayor of Boston challenged us. He said, listen, we need to do something about the Boston public schools, and we need someone to step up. Well, the politics in Boston are such that there's only one public research university in that city, but there are many other kinds of institutions. And no one wants to be the person who calls a meeting and no one shows up to it. So if you're a president and you call a meeting, even if you're the president of, say, Northeastern or Harvard or one of those institutions, no one shows up and makes it seem as if you don't have the impact that your institution typically does. So the last man standing to be the one to call that meeting was yours truly. So I called the meeting, and many of my colleagues, including one who is my co-teacher in classes at the university, John Saltmarsh, thought I was crazy. But when we called that meeting, close to 60 institutional leaders showed up because they understood how important it was to make sure that our young people had the right kinds of systems in place to graduate, but not only do that, to go out and serve once they did. And so what we were able to do was develop something called Success Boston. Now, Success Boston has had a lot of great progress. We haven't reached the S or the U on the word success yet, but we're smiling at least out of the corners of our mouths because we see ourselves making a difference. The first difference was the alignment of resources in a way that makes a difference, not only for, you can focus on those Boston public school young people, but then the elements of that help you with all of the other things you're trying to do at your institution. So the same kind of retention strategies that we were using, things like embedding a model that brought in nonprofits that have been working with these young people as pre-collegians, bringing them onto your campus and having them working with the people who actually are serving in those capacities on campus. People had to put down their egos because you know what happens when someone invades your campus. Who is this? Why does the chancellor have that person coming? But when they saw that the interest of those young people was at heart and we centered that conversation in that work, it has made a tremendous difference. The other thing is money. So we said, okay, we don't want you using any other resources than the ones you have. But we also went to the Boston Foundation, made Paul Grogan, their CEO, one of the co-chairs, along with myself, Dr. Carol Johnson, who is the superintendent of schools. But we also brought in as a silent co-chair, Dr. Gary Gottlieb from Partners Healthcare. because partners in our city can bring a lot of the things we need into play. But having the Boston Foundation there and hosting the first meeting at that space was my strategy to get those other presidents in the room. And so we called the meeting, we had it there, and then we began to work together. Now what that generated was, first of all, an opportunity for engagement. We knew that the real people are the people in the trenches every day doing the work. So we brought them together, made sure that we were there supporting that, but we let them work together. And the kind of ideas and sharing has made a tremendous difference. We've had a lot of success. If you go on the website for Success Boston, you'll see that. But that success is nothing compared to what will happen if we sustain it in the ways that we know we should. The problem with programs like this is, they get personalized, they are for this time and not timeless, and we're trying to create a sort of pathway to the future that we can connect so that it doesn't leave because Keith Motley decides he wants to go back to the classroom, or this one leaves, or Dr. Johnson, who just announced her retirement today, leaves during the summer. We want the systems to be in place to make a difference. So things like our Teach Next Year program that's on our campus, that brings in people who want to learn how to teach well, brings them in, and we put our prolific faculty to work, working with them and making sure that they're investing right in terms of their learning and their development. Then they actually go into a school. They don't start immediately in the classroom. They start by understanding what school culture is and witnessing that, and then moving on and on and on in the system, then finally getting into the classroom. And once they're there, determining whether that's something that they want to do. And then we know that we've had tremendous success because many of the school systems that we're involved with, including the Randolph schools, who many of you know just a few years ago were losing teachers and couldn't find teachers to teach. We're having a system in place that can make a difference. So Success Boston is the one thing I wanted to talk about today that I think has bridged for us this notion of alignment, but also what can happen when you work cooperatively, schools, the community, universities, colleges, because we're working across a platform. People, in Boston, there's this thing that if you come beyond 128, if you're outside that circle, you're typically not included. We're including everybody. Salem State, Babson, all those that are out there, Bentley and others are involved in this process, and it has made a tremendous difference because when we share among each other and we do it in a way that makes a difference, and we do it with the kind of passion that we bring to our campuses and our colleges and our universities every day, then that kind of work really begins to transform lives, and it will sustain itself long beyond all of us. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to be here with you today. And to my colleagues, thank you for all the work you continue to do. And I am going to work on that spit shine, because every time I see you, I get jealous.
I don't know if you were watching Bob, but it takes real courage to stand up and tell the chancellor his time is up. And he fidgeted in his chair for 3 minutes over the time, deciding whether he was going to stand up and tell it. As Monty Python would say, now for something completely different. We've gone from the biggest colleges and universities in the state to the smallest of the 29 public campuses in Massachusetts, Massachusetts Maritime Academy. And while at some universities and colleges they struggle with whether or not service learning, as important as it is, as important as everybody in this room knows it is, whether we should make it mandatory for our students in our institutions, universities and colleges. It was an easy decision for us because the students asked me to make it mandatory, so we did. My kids follow orders pretty well, so immediately we had it mandatory, and 100% of our freshmen must participate in service learning before they can move on to the privileges associated with being a sophomore. But what was interesting was more than 50% of the upper class, the sophomores, the juniors, and seniors, got such a rush out of helping other people, being an impact in somebody else's life, that they also stayed active in service learning. And that's saying something, because this age group that we administer to, it's all about me. It is so egocentric. It is in every textbook you talk about for those typical teenage 18 to 21. Number one motivator of behavior is peer pressure. That's all they're looking at. That's all they're listening to. That's all they care about. And to change their focus to someone else, to take them from complaining about the miseries of their life, and God knows my kids have a lot to complain about. They start college in August, they don't go to the end of June, there's 156 credits, they all take calculus, they all take physics, they all take chemistry, some take it more than once. They all have to take it, so they love to complain, and for me to then take them to a level where, hey, there are other people who have it worse than me. My dad's favorite phrase, I complained because I had no shoes until I met a man who had no feet. And that changes their perspective. So I want to talk quickly before you stand up and tell me to sit down about two things that we do that I think are important. One is STEM related. I love arguing with the governor every time I see him that in Massachusetts we don't make clothing anymore, we don't make cloth, we don't make shoes. Unlike Houston, Texas, where I was last week, we don't have gas and oil. We only have one resource, brains. And as you know, 3/4 of the people that graduate from high schools here in Massachusetts go on to public higher education. And if it isn't for brain power, the people that he talked about, the CEOs who are interested in Success Boston, are going to move out of Massachusetts. So it's all about brain power. And as much as I love the arts and as much as I get it, it's STEM for me. We're 100% STEM. So I need to get young people interested in STEM. So how do we do it? We go into the middle schools when education is still cool. Because in high schools, it's not cool anymore. So we go into the middle schools, and we go and introduce them to a Follow the Voyage program. Now, my students every January and February take the training ship, get it underway, and they sail. This year it was like the Beach Boys song, Bahamas, Bermuda, Barbados. It was great. It looked great. I mean, what you don't realize is that they are working 24/7. You know, that on Sunday, they don't let the ship drift while they all read the Sunday paper and drink coffee. We go into the middle schools and we have them follow the voyage. So they plot the latitude and longitude of the ship. We give them science questions and math questions and culture questions. I have actual students come and talk to them and visit with them, and then at the end of the sea term, they go back and they visit with the schools. And that whole time, those middle school students travel vicariously to these really great places, and it does two things. It expands their horizons, and it exposes them to college and to the coursework that we have in STEM, but also we recognize that not everybody is going to be attracted to a place where we cut your hair, wear polyester, wake you up at 5 in the morning, and Marines yell at you. But we've exposed them to college. And it works. They love it. The second thing I want to talk about is much more human, much more of the service for others. And our students 10 or 11 years ago decided to adopt the Cape and Islands Department of Children and Families. It used to be known as DSS for the gray hairs, silverbacked in the room. It's now DCF, Department of Children and Families. And about a dozen years ago, they said, all right, here's how we're going to do it. We're going to invite all of the Cape and Islands foster kids, adoptive kids, and the DCF workers to our campus for a fun day. A little bit of maritime Disney. And we have boat rides. They swim in the pool. We have caricature artists. We have pony rides on the softball field. We have balloons, and 100 of my kids participate in that day, and they take foster kids, they take them fishing, they take them on the boat, they fly kites, they play ball, they teach them how to play a frisbee, and for one day all those kids are not different. They're the same. But then it gets better. Then they work with the social workers and they adopt a dozen to 14 families in the Cape and Islands, and they do Thanksgiving dinner, Christmas dinner, Easter dinner, and every single wish on those kids' wish lists, including parents, because the social workers say, oh, and mom could use a coat, and dad could use a car, and the kids really want an Xbox 360 because they're tired of not having one, but they need a television to hook it up to. And my kids raise all the money. I'm talking tens of thousands of dollars, and they go shopping. They become Santa Claus. And they buy all of this stuff for these dozen families, and they stay with that family. But what really moves them is to be able to deliver the gifts, to be able to actually go to that family and drop them off and see the impact that they have, and that stays with them for the rest of their life. And that service learning is what we're all about. We can get 100% just because I can order them to do it, but it is a life-affirming, life-changing effect on them. And thank you all for helping us participate.
I want to make a comment before I pose a question to the panel that they can bounce off each other or choose not to answer or make me dig deeper. One comment is, it's highly evident here that we are in the midst of some very bold leaders. And I use that term with the principals that we try to hire, that we're looking for bold leaders. And bold people are those that have passion, that have energy, that see a vision and have stick-to-itiveness. Because most people don't like change. And most people want the status quo. And it's up to bold leaders to move. The problem with a key characteristic of a bold leader is they're humble. So take that characteristic of being humble and take what's on the front fold of a newspaper or a lead story. None of this information you're hearing today is ever on that front fold. Because what you're hearing today doesn't sell newspapers, is not a lead story right at 5:30 or 6 o'clock. It's buried if it gets in at all. Number one, because we're our own worst enemy of being humble as bold leaders, but it's also because people don't want to hear all the positive that's going out. The idea of civic engagement is to one person at a time, from grocery store to grocery store, say what's positive and what's good and what is right and what is happening. So we, as our worst enemy, as being bold leaders, don't promote ourselves enough, and you have to come to a summit to hear all the great things. But I am a firm believer that there is so much more positive and so much more good than literally, in this day and age, and I'm sure they can all attest to it, the one individual who calls the newspaper and it makes the front page. And I think we need to keep that in our minds. Now, segueing to that, Dr. Barbara Wortham, when I was going through coursework, had a great quote. The great quote was, "The only human that enjoys change is a wet baby." So with that being said, what are obstacles to saying that we're going to change the paradigm? It's not my classroom. It's not my silo of English that I teach with my department only, and I don't talk to anyone else. It's not my community college. It's not my public school district. It's not my university. How do we break the barrier, and is that an obstacle to this K-16 continuum? And so twofold. What are obstacles, and how do we break that barrier? To the esteemed panel.
I think, I'll give it a try. When he mentioned bold, I have to go back to my old days as an Air Force pilot, where we had a very important saying there, that there are old pilots and there are bold pilots, but there are no old, bold pilots. So I don't know if that applies to chancellors and superintendents and presidents as well. But Bob raises a very important point, and I think that Chancellor Motley has put his finger on the key, and that is the partnerships, the collaboration. We can call and try to get a press conference at BCC or at UMass-Boston, but when you have people like Paul Grogan and the Boston Foundation and all of those players that he mentioned, I think that is very important. And you have the start of it here in southeastern Mass as well. There was a partnership that UMass has sponsored, puts the superintendents and myself and the chancellor together, we speak as a group. I think that's the answer. We are sometimes our own worst enemy in education. We've cut ourselves into these silos, and you know, K through 6, 6 through 8, or 7 through 9, or high school, or and then junior college, or community college, or research universities, and all the Carnegie classifications. So we're our own worst enemy in that. We should have one voice, one education voice. You've heard the common theme with this gang up here, and we're absolutely behind it, but we don't make that front page full, Bob, because I don't think there's a group of us standing up vigorously and regularly making that case, the way the Chancellor is describing what his vision is for Boston. We should be doing that here as well.
Another obstacle is that we don't, we tend not to map out the things that we actually are doing as institutions. So we have great people doing wonderful work, and that work is in itself markets in or does some of the things that maybe humble people don't like to do. I know you pointed out the fact that I know that Paul Grogan's going to make sure it gets in the newspaper because he just does that. So having collaborators like that is important, but also understanding right within your own environment that Dwight is doing great things in the work that he does, and John is doing it, and Judy is doing it. So how do you map those things? I had an event called Are You on the Map? And I just invited everyone to come who was doing some kind of service learning, community engagement project. There were, when I said, how many of you are doing something in Dorchester? About 100 people stood up. And I said, how many of you knew the other person standing up was doing something? 75 sat down. Right. And so we saw what that problem was that just taking the time to map it, align it. Then now folk are working together in ways that we talk about this transdisciplinary and interdisciplinary thing that we want to happen as leaders on our campuses. This allows that to happen when you can get someone in sciences and in psychology and sociology and others to work together on issues in a way that makes a difference and applies all of that knowledge. It's a tremendous thing. So mapping, taking the time to do the things we know we should do, which is almost like exhaling as a leader. We all talk about that framework, but none of us take the time to release it. This foot has given me a chance, faculty members that are here, to sort of reflect. And reflection brings new ideas and new opportunity. And so I'm going to be able to go back to the campus with those ideas, knowing I have great people to put those in place. But we might be humble, but there is at least the E in ego in a lot of us that wants to hear some of the good things about what we're doing get out there. And sometimes we have to use others to do it, but more importantly, we need to look inside our souls to find out the things that are making a difference and how that's going to be applicable to all that we want to do going forward.
Anyone else? Or do we move on? Okay.
Yeah. I think this notion or concept of an integrated sort of systemic approach is so critically important. Fran and I were at a meeting yesterday with Matt and heard about some of the great things that we didn't even know was going on, right? With partnerships with UMass-Dartmouth. One of those was just so intriguing to me. David Chapman, who's here, as a professor, his class is working with our students at Henry Lord. Now, for those of you who are not residents of Fall River, I'm closing Henry Lord as a middle school for chronic underperformance. David's class is working with the students to create a legacy project. How great is that? But also, we didn't know about it, and that's not a judgment about not knowing about it, but there's all these great nuggets of things going on, to your point, that if we can just sort of map out and have this systemic, organized, integrated approach to it, I think it's just even more, it just lends itself to being this really terrific opportunity for students.
Great. Thank you.
So the big obstacle is money. No one said it, but it's the 900-pound elephant in the room. We don't support with money the issues that we've been talking about. We do it on the margins. We do it with donated money. We do it with raised money. It's a shame that my kids have to raise tens of thousands of dollars to encourage STEM or to otherwise encourage young people to be on a college campus. We have got a unique way of raising money on our campus. I stole it from Catholic schools. My youngest son went to a Catholic school, and of course we bought him the uniforms, and he came home and he said, Dad, I need $5. Why? Well, because on Friday, if I bring in $5 and give it to a charity, I can wear regular clothes. I said, oh, this is brilliant. First they make you buy uniforms, and then you pay to not wear them. Brilliant. So a couple of times a semester, my kids get to pay for the privilege of dressing like all of your kids. And they raise tens of thousands of dollars to do that. But if as a state, we recognized that we, a couple of times in the recent past, spent more money on prisons than we did supporting public higher education, that just is a sin.
One more short question, and then we're going to get it. And I just want a nodding of heads or yes or no. Do we have a number of questions from the group, or do we want to? Yes, we do. Okay. So what I'm going to do is one more short question and then give it to the group until our time is up. Sustainability. Money is an obstacle. So are people. Sometimes deterrents are, again, those people who love the world of comfort, and it's our job to make them uncomfortable because we have the vision and we see it. And this isn't just for those up here, but advice to you from those up here. It's all about sustaining initiatives, because the objective of some with people is to find, I told somebody once when I was a vice principal, I know what my job is. I'm a roadie at a concert. The teachers are the performers. They're the miracle workers, and it's my job to let them perform. So I'm the roadie on the stage pushing people away, pushing all the issues away, and that's what goes on. So we have a vision. We don't always have a foot that causes us to reflect and be able to take that time. And what we're constantly doing is being that roadie. How do we have the vision and yet sustain that through our people? Quickly if you can, because then I want to put it out to the group. Anyone? No. Okay.
Fine, take it. That's a really good question, Bob, because it is very uncomfortable for folks to change, right? And as as we have this new vision, and I spoke to this a little bit before, so Fall River is built on this really proud tradition and work ethic, and that a high school education was good enough, and it's no longer good enough. So how do we help families, in many respects, who were able to support their children through this sort of work ethic, that this is no longer. We have to be able to show children a different path. And I think that's, and even for some of the staff in our schools, it's sort of this question, well, why do we have to change? It was good enough before, and I think it's just really maintaining that vision that we must create a college-going culture in the city that will impact economic development, that will ultimately impact educational attainment. And again, to point out the huge potential with the partnerships with higher education, when our kids see college kids coming to their schools to mentor them, to help them, whether it's help them with their reading skills in third grade or at Laterno, when UMass-Dartmouth students come in to support our English language learners, or UMass-Dartmouth students come to Durfee High School to help kids fill out applications, or whether our kids, we sent all our 4th and 5th graders here 2 weeks ago to come on campus to create that opportunity that that there is hope, there is promise, and just to keep pushing that, because we know that that's the way to change lives for our 10,000 kids that we serve.
Sometimes the change is that you are allowing people to do the kinds of things that they know make a difference, and sometimes cultures prevent that So just allowing it to happen sort of helps transform their thinking, but also their attitude towards doing what they know can work. They become contributors as opposed to people just standing on the sidelines. Full disclosure, though, the other reason to use a Paul Grogan was they had money. And I knew that if I had money when I invited folk to the table, and I put that in their ear before I asked them to come, they would show up. So having the kind of resource, to have someone to hire someone who could focus exclusively on working with those people with great ideas and making sure that they move forward was so important to sustainability. The other thing was those who did not have the resources to do the kinds of extra things that maybe I could do at a university, in a university community like the one we have, we could fund them. You know, quietly make them be able to do what they need to do and all that. But just really this notion of allowing great ideas to surface and then supporting them and creating a culture that supports that is so important to the energy that you need for something like that to happen within your organization.
I agree with that. I wanted to clarify also when I mentioned collaborations, picking up on what the Chancellor mentioned, we need champions advocating for us outside of the world of education, and the Chancellor has seen that. And I just wanted to say how much I admire the Governor for his proposed budget. He has created what is an inflective moment for education, the world of all of education throughout the Commonwealth, and he has stepped forward and made a bold, courageous stroke with his budget preparation. And lo and behold, people in this room and elsewhere feel one way or another about taxes. But lo and behold, the money has survived for education, has survived the budget process without the tax, necessarily the revenue from whatever we have or don't have in taxes. And the reason that I believe, my opinion, the reason is that we had advocates. A couple names were mentioned, and absolutely big players in the Commonwealth who stepped forward as our champions. And they became the advocates that other people who could move mountains listened to. They kind of expect us to go up and whine and beg and cry for more money in the legislature for education. And I've been doing it for 13 years. It's humiliating. But we do it. However, nothing happened until this year when some of these large, very important business people and corporate leaders and chambers and WIBs and all of the community activities, activists rather, came together and said, you've got to fund community colleges and public schools and public higher education. Not just workforce development, but it's an important thing for the Commonwealth. And that's why I say it's a watershed moment for us, and I thank the Governor for that. The Admiral's absolutely right. Money comes down to money, and those are the people that can get it for us.
I'm going to take a quick risk here, and the risk is that I'm going to ask a question I don't know the answer to, but I've heard quite often if we wait it out, been there, done that, seen them come, seen them go, if we wait it out, it'll be fine. Quick question. Admiral Gernon, how many years have you been in your current position?
I've been working at the Academy since 1978. I've been the president since 2005.
Meg Mayo Brown.
I've been in Fowler since 2003, superintendent since 2009.
Okay. Dr. Sprague.
Well, I've been in community colleges going on 40 years now, but I'm 13 years as president of Bristol Community College.
And Dr. Martin.
2003, came from a private school to the University of Massachusetts and served 2 years as a systems person and 8 years as chancellor.
I didn't know the answer, but I knew the answer. These are very successful examples of what's going on. I'm a crazy outlier in my 8th year and very happy in what I do. And the point is, you can't sustain if there's constant change and turnover. And so I didn't know that answer, but just by hearing the successes, I knew the answer before I asked it. Sir, you had a question.
Thank you. I'm John Reiff from UMass-Amherst, and I am delighted to hear the four of you take up one of the big elephants in the room, which is the needs that we have for funding to do this kind of work that we're all trying to do. And so my question is this. Those of us who are in the K through 12 system or in higher ed have students. And our students either mostly are eligible to vote or will be as they get older. So some of you folks over there are right at that cusp, I'll bet. My question is this. What is your thinking about what we should be doing in our institutions, in our colleges and universities, in our schools, to, first of all, encourage students to develop a civic identity, a sense that they can participate with other people to build the kind of society that we would want to live in. And then secondly, to see their own self-interest in the decisions that are being made about public funding for the public good, and to recognize that they have legislators who represent them who are often afraid to vote for that funding or for any more of that funding. So that's my question.
For the sake of time, we'll have one person take it on, and then we'll go with another question. So who's the one who would love to take this question?
How about this? Could I get a microphone to the back corner?
Right.
And I'm going to ask Mike Costa and Jay Perez to answer this question. They are
Great.
derby teachers who work with our students each and every day in civics. So let's
level and certainly earlier than that. And I think to assess and really look at being ready to be college and career ready as the new push through DESE, I think Durfee High School is taking a major step this year with guidance and with the administration and through Central, that we're getting our entire sophomore class into a job shadow experience, getting them into the community to recognize that that civic engagement has to be a lifelong experience for them. And I think by putting them at, we have some students going to People Incorporated, the Fowler Police Department, Bristol Community College. I've spoken to Dr. Sprague earlier and Mike Vieira, others in the room, recognizing that our students, also at Meditech, we sent 25 to 30 students to align with STEM and their career pathways, recognizing that all of these students, we can't just center on them in their junior and senior year. We have to be doing this from day one of their public education. Our students deserve that. My own children deserve that. Your children deserve that. And it's something that, as a school, we're embracing it. I think we always have, but I think we have to recognize that they are, they're tactile learners. They're learning through media. We're talking about blended classrooms. We're talking about flipped classrooms. I think all of these channels are essential to helping these students at this table and every single student in our schools in the direction you're speaking of and being a major success and being the future leaders in this room. And that's where I see it.
Great, thank you. We have time for one quick question and one quick answer. Notice I said I played referee. This is the first time I'm playing referee. One quick
I'm
question.
interested in perspectives on what might be called the emerging courtship between certificate programs and degree programs.
That does apply to a good deal to community colleges, and I'd like to add another layer of non-credit credentials as well. And it comes, what is a fashionable term now, is stackable credentials. And we are very excited about the certificates that the high school students can earn at the same time and do through dual enrollment, the associate's degree and then the baccalaureate, and then move on always. So you stack these credentials. In addition, you filter in a non-credit training. This is very important for the workforce needs of our region, and sometimes employers, they don't care if you have those credits. They need to know, can you do the skill? And that's where our non-credit activities come in. So there's a direct connection. Thank you for that question, because there's too long, I think, when I said, well, education, we're our own worst enemy. We've ignored non-credit activities for too long, and we also focus on the baccalaureate or a PhD as opposed to the steps necessary to stack those credentials and get there in time, not within a beat-the-clock framework where you must do it in a certain time or you're a failure.
Thank you very much. Can I have a round of applause for our panel? One message that I want to just state real quick. Businesses want competent graduates. Colleges and universities want prepared graduates. Students aren't born in grade 9. High school grade 9 students say, teachers say they don't prepare them in middle school, and in grade 5 they say they don't prepare them in grade 4. We need to map out the pre-K through 16 and beyond initiative together, remembering that leadership is where you are. It's not just on a panel. And finally, I think it's fitting with what's happened in the last week. I heard a quote by Doris Kearns Goodwin on one of the talk shows this weekend. And I want to state it for UMass-Dartmouth, for everyone in the room, and really for the culture that we talk about making this happen. She stated that during the bombing in Great Britain in the 40s, there were signs right after the morning after bombings that said, "Come right in. We're more open than usual."
I just want to let you know that now we're going to take, I guess, what amounts to a 12-minute break, because we're going to start again at 10:30. Okay, so do some networking, enjoy some coffee in the hall, but come back to 10:30. Thank you.
I'm Barb from Kansas, Massachusetts.
I had the pleasure of spending the day with keynote speaker Dr. Ira Huckabee, and a couple of things resonated with me. First, that he is passionate about the transformative nature that university-assisted community schools can have on communities, schools, and most importantly, students. Secondly, that as members of the community, universities can improve the quality of life of our communities through mutually beneficial partnerships. And finally, that he is a Yankees fan. Well, we won't hold that against him. Dr. Huckabee is Associate Vice President and Director of the Netta Center for Community Partnerships at the University of Pennsylvania. His work with the local community of West Philadelphia has created a new vision for university community partnerships. It is a vision that is a national model on how universities can play an active, collaborative role with community partners to effect positive change. Dr. Huckabee and the Netta Center have received numerous awards for their work with the community. He serves on numerous national committees and has written a number of articles and chapters on university civic engagement, as well as 2 books, Dewey's Dream, Universities and Democracies in an Age of Education Reform, and The Obesity Culture, Strategies for Change, Public Health and University Community Partnerships. So without further ado, it's my honor and pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker today with admiration and respect, Dr. Ira Huckabee.
Thank you very much, Gary. And I think that very kind introduction, and one thing it shows is that service learning and civic engagement can even bring Red Sox fans and Yankees fans together. That's true. Maybe. We'll see. So what I'm going to speak about today, first of all, I want to know what a thrill it is and honor to be here. I had an extraordinarily wonderful day yesterday with colleagues from the University of Massachusetts-Dartmouth. A great opportunity to meet with principals and superintendents, and also to meet with members of the Chamber Committee and faculty. And it's been really a delight to be here. It's also an honor to follow such a distinguished panel, and a great joy to see so many long-term friends from the state of Massachusetts, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, who've been involved and leaders in service learning and civic engagement. What I'd like to speak with you about today is how university-assisted or college-assisted community schools can help realize the democratic promise of America, schooling and society, how that's a way to reach the democratic promise of American society and schooling. And my position is very simple, that no radical reform of higher education, no radical, successful even, education reform. No successful education reform without radically changing higher education. Higher education, in my judgment, is only going to change in a significant way in the crucible of significant, sustained, serious partnerships with public schools and their communities. Abstract isolation, contemplation, ivory towerism will neither shed intellectual light nor produce positive democratic change. You have to be engaged. I strongly agree with the Chilean sociologist Eugenio Turini that the answer to the question of what kind of education do we need is found in the previous question. What kind of society do we want? Education and society are dynamically interconnected. If we, together, hope to maintain and develop a particular type of society, then we must develop and maintain the type of educational system that will be conducive to that society. And I'm going to state this directly. No effective democratic schooling, there can be no democratic society. So the question is, what's to be done? And that's a very hard question. To get from here to there, we can talk about the problem. The easiest thing to do is describe a problem. The second issue is why. But the hard question is what is to be done. How do we get from where we are to where we know we want to go? And in my judgment, higher education-assisted community schools is a powerful means, not the only means. One that we have been working with, but we have not cracked that atom. We have a ways to go. But in fact, it's a powerful means, a means of potential success for changing the schooling system pre-K through 20 plus, and for helping America to fulfill its historic promise to its citizens. Now, university-assisted community schools have deep roots historically. Comes out of the work of the settlement house movement. Comes out of the work of Lillian Wald in New York and Jane Addams in Chicago and Hull House. It comes out of their idea that although settlements were scattered, schools were everywhere, and the services could be provided to people in neighborhoods, in communities. And then John Dewey in 1902 made a major address, an essay called School as Social Center, and in that address he said unequivocally that he was taking these ideas from the great settlement houses. He really was dynamically influenced by Jane Addams. In fact, it was only when he was with Addams he was able to practice, not just philosophize. And in fact, what Dewey saw in this idea was that the school as social center would be the place to build democracy. The idea that the schoolhouse was the place that people could come and gather. And he spoke very deeply and seriously about the idea that it was the place that you could provide services, engage, help bring people together, help them have lifelong learning. He called it continuous education. He said all fields need continuous education, and not just doctors and not just engineers, but everybody. And he said schools could play that role. And for him, at this time, when he wrote this essay, the school was the key to democracy. The key to democracy. The means that education was a means, but for him it was that you can't have democracy without face-to-face communication, without what teachers do in classrooms, without what occurs in what he called in another essay, amiable discourse. People learning from each other, talking together. And he never connected in that essay the idea that he wrote about earlier, which is the other key issue and idea, that in fact schooling could be best done not by teacher talk, not by writing on whiteboards or blackboards, but by engaged problem solving with the world. Thinking occurs, Dewey wrote, thinking occurs in a forked road situation where there is a problem and a dilemma. All else is rote. The idea that human beings learn best in active engagement with their environment and reflect critically. It's not learning by doing, it's learning by doing and critical reflection. By engagement and learning from experience consciously, actively. And that idea of higher ed assisted community schools is in fact the idea that these schools should and could be hubs for democratic life, and should and could engage young people from pre-K through higher ed through 20, in learning actively together in schools and communities. And part of the proposition to that is that community schools need additional resources. Now, Dewey never as far as I can see, understood higher education. In fact, one reason Dewey's ideas have not had the impact they could have is because he focused only on a lab school as his example. You know, Dewey really viewed, in many ways, the greatest philosopher preceding him to be Plato. But Plato had an opposite idea of how you learn. Plato saw learning as occurring in abstract contemplation, separate from the world, and he believed in doing what? Creating philosopher kings. Deeply anti-democratic. Dewey was deeply democratic and said we learn by engagement and critical reflection in the world. But Plato was a better organizer than Dewey. Because Plato, the abstract guy, said, give me higher ed, and I could help shape schooling. So he created an academy in the hills outside of Athens to prevent democratic excess. And what he did in that academy was he separated the higher education and educated in contemplation, abstraction, analysis, and it dominated schooling for 900 years. Dewey created a lab school, first grade through 6th, with a teacher-student ratio of, I think it was 6 students to 1 teacher. Did he get lost? A school, and I say this with great love because I raised 2 wonderful daughters with faculty brats, and he had these school for kids of that background, and the impact has been in special progressive schools and not systemically. So what he failed to see is what the person who he really was reacting to in his philosophy repeatedly, read repeatedly, and criticized for separation and abstraction and non-engagement. It was the contemplative Plato who helped change the world more powerfully by his focus on higher education. Community schools need resources. They have a deep history tied to American development, from a school in East Harlem run by Leduc called Benjamin Franklin High School that educated Daniel Patrick Moynihan, among others, but it was funded by WPA dollars, to great work in rural West Virginia and Ballard, Kentucky, funded by the Sloan Foundation and by the First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, run by Elsie Clapp, to the work that the Mott Foundation did in Flint for a period, outside money. But Dewey didn't look to that, but more than that, he didn't look at the key role that higher education could play, because higher education naturally should be in partner with our schools. That's what this panel talked about. It's not education, first grade, second grade. It's not schooling, first grade, second grade. We have to be one system. We have to be one system. And the issue then that emerged was higher education naturally should connect to schools and its communities. And in fact, it was part of their function. And if higher education is engaged, it can provide the resources. But there's something else about higher ed assisted community schools. It's good for the higher educational institution. It's good for them because what it does is it enables the higher education institution at one level, which I'll talk about, to fulfill its historic function of advancing democracy. It also improves higher education because we only learn deeply about the real issues of life when we work with others who are engaged in those issues. Graduate schools of education cannot hope to really learn about education unless they are intertwined with the schools themselves. Business faculties cannot hope to really learn business unless they are deeply engaged in improving the economic life of their environment. Locality provides us the opportunity to focus on what I would term universal problems: poverty, unemployment, inadequate health care, poor schooling, universal problems that are manifested globally. The work we do in West Philadelphia does not just concern West Philadelphia. It is a phenomenon of poor schooling that affects every city in the world. In 1996, there was a major meeting of the United Nations held in a global meeting called Habitat 2, focused in Istanbul. It was the largest UN meeting up to that time. The preamble of that meeting said the following: sustainable urban development is the most significant problem facing humanity now and into the 21st century. Not facing West Philadelphia, not facing Falls River, not facing the Bronx, New York, where you can tell from my French accent I'm from, not from Cleveland, not facing but Istanbul, Johannesburg, Mexico City. Universal problems manifested locally as being absolutely crucial and helping higher education to learn with others how to solve those pressing dilemmas. Learning from practitioners, learn from people who do, learn from people who live it. That knowledge is not the difference between applied and theoretical. That is a false dichotomy from the ancient Greeks. I won't go into that because we'll be here all day. There's a false dichotomy. The issue is that knowledge gets created in different domains, in different ways, and in most domains, Benjamin Franklin was right. It's Franklin's whole model. I have to cite Franklin. He founded Penn. If you don't cite Franklin, they dock your pay. So it's done. I'm going to talk about Franklin again because I think he was a very significant figure beyond the University of Pennsylvania. But the fact is that if you go to Penn, you'll see statues of Franklin all over. And I had a friend come from Europe who asked me if it was a Catholic school. And who's your saint? And I said, he's not a saint. His name's Benjamin Franklin. But he says, but he's a saint for your university. And he was right. So the issue is Franklin's idea is human beings learn by integration of theory and practice, and Dewey's even more profound understanding that we learn in the engagement with the world and solving the problems of life. So a question is raised then, is that students and faculty can do things better when they work with practitioners and those in the field. The next question is it appropriate? Now, those colleagues of mine in higher education know that one of the critiques we hear, and we hear this even today, after facts on the ground, and this wonderful panel, they knew better. But they even know on their own faculties, they have to know on their own faculties, that there are people who say, it ain't the business of higher education. And they tell us our purpose is disciplinary knowledge, and in fact to advance the frontiers, undefine what those frontiers are, of course, but to advance those frontiers. And I would say, as a historian, at least once being a serious historian, but a historian, saying that is a radically wrong interpretation of the history of higher education. Now, I won't go into this in detail, but I'll give some overview. We have deep civic roots that began with the colonial colleges, with Harvard being a Congregationalist school, and William and Mary Anglican, and Yale Congregationalist, I'll skip Penn for a minute, and Princeton Presbyterian, and Rutgers Dutch Reformed, and King's College, Columbia Anglican, and Dartmouth being Congregationalist, and Brown Baptist, and what were they there for? To create Christian commonwealths of religiously orthodox men at the time, and ministers to serve the people. It wasn't books only and internalization, it was to serve the world. And then Franklin, again back to Franklin, but Franklin said when in a piece he wrote in 1749 on proposals for the education of youth in Pennsylvania that led to the formation of the University of Pennsylvania, he said the purpose of a college of Philadelphia was to educate young people, he said men, but young people, with an inclination moral, joined with nobility intellectual, to serve mankind, human beings, one's country, friend, and family, which ability to serve is the great aim and end of all learning. Ability to serve. The idea of engagement. He actually wrote in that piece, just to take a side view quick, do you want to learn about agriculture? Don't just stay in the university. Work with farmers. No one talked about that. Get your hands dirty. Work with the best farmers. But the idea of an inclination joined with the ability to serve is the purpose of learning. And then you look at the land-grant institutions, and you can go to all of them, founded out of the Morrill Act of 1862, with the clear mission of educating the farmer, improving life in the states, advancing military science, agricultural science, for the purposes of what? To make life better. The most famous example was the Wisconsin idea. The Wisconsin idea at the University of Wisconsin and argued the boundaries of the university were the boundaries of the state. And when they asked Charles McCarthy, the legislative librarian, and who coined the term probably of the Wisconsin idea, why were all the progressive reforms start in the Midwest? He said, because it started in the Midwest because of a combination of soil and seminar. And in the urban context, which people often don't speak about, this was central, and I won't go into it in great detail because of time, but it was the transformation of urban research universities. Johns Hopkins was the first modern research university in the United States, and it developed along the lines as Daniel Coy Gilman made a major speech, who was the president of Hopkins, said Hopkins and research universities should be formed to end misery among the poor, increase honesty in business, includes education in the schoolhouse. Now I want to be frank about that. The University of Pennsylvania has not done what was argued by Daniel Coy Gilman effectively enough, nor has Hopkins. But that was the purpose. Said it clearly. Said it clearly. W.E.B. Du Bois at the University of Pennsylvania wrote The Philadelphia Negro, which is the greatest single ethnographic work perhaps ever written. He wrote in that book, why, what was it about? And he was very elitist in his dress and style, from Great Barrington, Massachusetts, and he wore apparently a bowler hat and a cane. And he said, why did the people of South Philadelphia, Philadelphia Negro, respond so well? He said, because they knew I was writing the book for science and practical reform. Not science and disciplinary expertise, but science and practical reform to change the world. And most powerfully, the statement made by William Rainey Harper at the University of Chicago, who called universities the messiah of democracy that should be located in poor communities. He was very religious Baptist. And his devotion to pedagogy still is powerful. In fact, John Dewey would not have done schools without William Rainey Harper. I am convinced of that. And Harper wouldn't have done Chicago, the university, without Jane Addams. That's another lecture. So he talked about the role of this. He says he was devoted so strongly to pedagogy, and it was based on two propositions central to his vision for Chicago universities. First, I'm quoting him, education is the basis of all democratic progress. The problems of education are therefore the problems of democracy. Second proposition, he believed that more than any other institution, the university determines the character of the schooling system. And he said, through the schooling system, the character of which, in spite of itself, the university determines and, in a large measure, controls. Through the schooling system, every family in the entire broad land of ours is brought in touch with this university. For from the university proceeds the teachers or the teachers of teachers. Everyone in this room, whatever field, the role of teachers and the connection to the university. So the issue then before us is that history didn't go on to the issue of the role of regional universities and colleges, the roles of community colleges to educate people for jobs and careers and for higher education. The democratic public role is deeply embedded. Unfortunately, it was lost, and again, we will not for a period. That period really began post-World War I, It was a result really of it looking outward. It had to do with a sense of disillusion from World War I. The idea of this great Baconian, Francis Bacon's ideal that the purpose of learning, great philosophy of science, was for the relief of man's estate, and the ethical root of learning got moved to a more scientific understanding of just observation. But that began to change in 1990, and it has changed at great pace forward. This meeting, you exemplify that change. Profound. But you know, even if it's our right purpose, and even if with the end of the Cold War and the turning more inward, even with the idea of the generation of the 60s coming of age and pushing universities, even with the change that resulted from African studies, African American studies, women's studies, all of those changes, even with all of them, the resistances, of course, still exist. But one thing now that is very clear, it is in higher education's deepest, enlightened self-interest to be engaged in this work, one for institutions like my own that are in poor communities. The idea that the environment deeply affects us. It's also in our interest because what we heard from that wonderful panel, they're our students. They're our students. Who's going to walk through those doors? But there's another reason. Higher education, in my judgment, cannot and will lose if it makes its claim to the reason to exist is we educate people for narrow career success. The argument will be do more of it, but do it cheaper, do it more electronically, get the teacher out of the classroom for higher education. The answer needs to be that we have a role in the public good. And I believe that role is clearer and clearer defined, not just intellectually, but what we do in our classrooms. Every teacher knows what we teach is connected to how we teach it and how we deal with people. Higher education has the role of that citizenship function, but also advancing knowledge for a better society. That's intertwined. Research universities have a crucial role in that process, but they also need to teach for citizenship. It's also in the best interest of higher ed, because now I'll get opportunist a bit. I believe it's a way to get money. It's not just a week to stop cuts, but there are resources if we work on this to prove our case and get resources from government, but foundations and other funders. As a colleague of mine said, and I said this yesterday, I didn't coin this, it was from a colleague of mine at the University of Pennsylvania, said, altruism pays better than any other money-grubbing strategy. So one of the issues that then faces us, if this is making sense, and you represent this tremendous change. I work as head of a global consortium. There's universities all over the world doing this. All over the world. Then why aren't we moving quicker? And I'll just touch on that and then talk about university-assisted community schools in greater detail and its work and what we've tried and done. Well, one reason we have difficulties is the very structure of our institutions create enormous fragmentation and isolation. That in fact, the organization of higher education itself provides deep problems, and I'll return to this in a minute. The Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development had a wonderful book written in 1983 called The University and the Community. And it was a wonderful epigraph. Communities have problems, universities have departments. Questions of how do we bring people together? How do we create a genuine learning community of higher education and schooling? What do we do? What do we do? And my argument very simply is what I talked about before. In the neighborhood, locally. Locally. That work is easily accessible. We can bring people together from different schools and departments. We can develop relationships of trust with our community and school partners. We all know that trust is crucial to learning. If universities sometimes believe you can just drop in and parachute and you observe. No one ever behaves the same when they're observed. But they behave as they behave and share with you if you are part of a common enterprise. if you are trying to make a real difference, so you can develop relationships of trust, which is crucial to what the anthropologists call tacit and nuanced knowledge, to really learn from people. You also can create the multidisciplinary partnerships, because these problems can't be solved unless we all do it together. We can't solve schooling problems, just education people. We need people in health and business and political science to work together. We can't solve economic problems if we only focus on narrow economic issues. Teachers know that their students are human beings, not just vectors of receiving information, or recipients of information through vectors. And the other component of this is we can then evaluate how we do. We can evaluate, is the community improved? Is the school doing better? We talked about that yesterday with the principals. Is the school doing better? Not just on testing, but on a variety of indicators. Is the university teaching better? Is their knowledge production? Are the mutual relationships truly mutually beneficial? Universities have been in communities for a very long time, and I believe until the 90s, in the late 80s, the paradigm often was, we study the community, we get tenure, you get poorer. It's not a good deal. Now the issue, is it mutually beneficial at producing facts and changes on the ground? So the question is, that local focus will strengthen. Why? Because again, it is universal dilemmas that are manifested locally. Now, particularities matter enormously. You only can produce change. It's easy to pontificate. But the question is, on the ground, making the change, but they're similar to other places. And we share, we learn together, we form a broader learning community to improve society. So what have we done to move this forward? Because and that really, to me, is, of course, a crucial question. I want to start with this with an absolute clarity. Penn has not solved this problem. I've been working at this so many years that it's hard to believe. I've been working at this my whole career, even as a student activist, but certainly as a professional since the early 80s. So as a student activist, that's the late 1960s. I was 4 when I went to college, but that's a whole other story. So I've been doing this my whole life, and we have not cracked the atom, and we need to learn from others, and it's a hard work. And the approaches, and the reason it's hard work is something else that Dewey wrote in 1927, The Republic and Its Problems, where he talked about the most important problem facing society was the development of democratic neighborly community. And he said, we haven't solved it because it's in first instance, it's an intellectual problem. He didn't mean abstract. He meant it's so complicated, we don't know how to do it. It's very hard. It's very hard. So look at places all over the world. Look at Philadelphia, and Falls River, and Cleveland, and London. We don't have democratic neighborly communities. And why is it hard? Because it's a real-world problem. And it is not rocket science. It's infinitely harder than rocket science. So we have to do this together, all of us. So what have we done? We have 2 concepts. I'll start with the first, which is a form of service learning, and I'll get to university-assisted community schools and give some principles. The first concept is a form of service learning. The phrase doesn't matter. We had to use these words because of the Penn context. Academically based community service. Service learning, like other courses, involved in classroom activity and reflection. I'll describe 1 or 2 examples, but it has at times a different twist, and a lot of service learning has this twist, so it's not unique to us. It's problem solving. The idea that higher education is at its core a problem solving entity. So you reflect and learn, but you also do to make a difference. So I'll give you an example. Tutoring is great and necessary, but changing local public schools with the schools democratically should be what universities are about. Having, in fact, health information is useful, very important, but what universities should do is help to work to improve health care deeply for the people in those communities. Economic, to say building a house is important, absolutely, it is crucial, but in fact our role should be community development in some ways, some form possible, and feeding the hungry is absolutely crucial. And I want to make this clear, community service and doing is crucial. It's not just charity, actually. It's humanity. It's being a person. But, and I mean this, working seriously to end poverty in the communities you're a part is what universities should do. And I obviously believe they can actually make a difference and do that. So the question is academically based community service. I'll give 2 quick examples. I'll give maybe 3 quick examples because STEM was discussed also. So we have a course taught, and I'll start with a course related to something I'll discuss in a minute, a health center we've developed. We have a course taught in nursing school. It's a course at a health center. It's taught by Terry Littman. Terry Littman has her students measure growth in height and then gets them served. She also has them engaged in fitness nights, working with high school students at the SARE school. These are nurse practitioners. And these nurse practitioners work with these children. They do physical activity. They teach the community. They work on issues of thriving. They talk about different levels of access. And Terry, working with these students, the students in the high school get served and teach younger kids. But also Terry Littman works her students with the high school students on research. In the last 5 years, they have attended the National Pediatric Nursing Association, and they've won first or second prize as the top research poster at a national meeting done by the SARE high school students and nurse practitioners. And Terry, this is a sign of change in pen. They just have an awarded pen. It's called the Normal Lang Award for Practice and Policy. And usually they give it to, they never usually, it's the first time they gave it, but usually this regular, not engaged faculty get this award. Terry won the first award, the first prize. At the University of Pennsylvania, we have a great faculty member, just one of the most delightful senior members. He's like 80 years old now, William LeBeau. And those who know academics know Bill LeBeau. If you take their stars, and they're like superstars, supernova stars. He's on every national academy. He has won every award probably besides a Nobel. He gave the Charles Harris Lecture for the ACLS, which is the highest humanities lecture you can give. And he spoke about actually the work I'm going to describe as his most meaningful. Bill LeBeau, I had 2 students of mine, one named Ishalim and the other named Tim Durkin. They came to me in 1997, 98, said we want to deal with the issue of the problem of reading and African American youth. And I said, I know nothing about that, because my students do general research, and I have to find faculty who really know stuff. So I said, see LeBeau, he's one of the 2 greatest sociolinguists in the world, and he's done work in Harlem in the 1960s on African American dialect as a language. They go to LeBeau. LeBeau always wanted to do this work. LeBeau turns his major teaching to work in West Philadelphia schools to close the reading differential of African American youth. He focused on using hip-hop rhythm, but native, local culture and history. And I want to be careful about this. The work he did at his school had the greatest increase in reading in the entire Commonwealth. Now, I want to make this clear. If you start at the very bottom, you could have the biggest increases. Don't let people fool you. And I want to be very concrete about this. His work continues to have big impact. It's been funded by NSF. It went all over the country with Latino communities. But LeBeau is still doing it. He worked with textbook companies. They developed this work. We didn't like working with the textbook companies. He didn't think he could change the world enough. So he's now developed student volunteer organizations linked to his courses at Penn and at other universities, so students can in fact develop what he calls the Penn Reading Road Initiative. When he goes to meetings, and he's like a superstar in the field, in Latin, in English, and other fields, he says his biggest lectures are about his work in West Philly. He's been there since 1997. He just won the Franklin Medal from the Benjamin Franklin Institute for the most outstanding contributions in science. What did he win it for? For all he's done with his wonderful work on a language atlas, on his wonderful work with fishermen in Nantucket, with whalers and fishermen in Nantucket, which was one of his early work. But most of the article was about work in West Philly, with Penn students, Penn undergraduates who do the interviews, who write, students in the school who write. And on STEM, I'll give one story about STEM, and I'll connect it to university assisted. In the field of STEM, there is a chair of our physics department, Larry Gladney. Larry is a great physicist, does a lot of STEM work, and we have a project with South Africa and China on STEM. The South Africans are visiting us. They're coming in to visit, and one of the members of that group, what Larry does is he has his students learn physics by teaching physics. There are no real labs in those schools. They build labs. They bring them on Penn's campus. And Larry Gladney works with these kids. We have about 15 of these courses, learning science by teaching it, from neurobiology to math. And the head of the South African deputy of their National Science Foundation, the National Research Foundation, says, is this work serious and embedded in Penn? And Larry is a very mild man. He's one of my nicest colleagues. And Larry looks at him and says, I'm the chairman of physics. I can do anything I want. I spend 2 afternoons a week having my students learn by teaching in University City High School, and I work with teacher development and learn from those teachers. Power of that to his own learning and his students' learning. So now to get to the key issue of university-assisted community schools. University-assisted community schools I've already described, and I'll just give one example and then I'll conclude. So the idea is that we need to bring these things together, and then I want to talk about what the attributes of them are. And what we do is that we bring these guys together and these women together to work with us. Carol Baldwin, who does ethnomusicology, we bring them into the school building, and we bring volunteers, and we bring work-study students, and we bring academic interns and these courses together. My center teaches about 17 to 1,800 students a year, about 60 courses, about 800 other students in internships and work-study and in volunteer, and they work at those same schools. Deeply connected on an ongoing basis, so it aggregates and it integrates. Change does not come from single act. There is no magic bullet. So you need lots and lots of partners. You need to create, in effect, a group working with the teachers in the school, because the issues that affect young people are not just the issues of learning information, it's also the issue of learning deeply and clearly and sharply about learning how to learn, having confidence and being able to develop, and having your needs. The middle-class children have done all the time taken care of. So at one of our schools, we had wanted to develop a health center for many years, because the community wanted a limited primary care health center, health promotion, disease prevention center. And one summer in 2002, a student in my seminar said, Dr. Harkavy, you're doing this all wrong. I love the honesty of undergraduates. And I said, why am I doing it all wrong? He said, you're doing it all wrong because you know the answer because the community wants it. But that's not sufficient. You have to ask the schools at Penn what John Dewey would have asked them. I really got angry. And I said, what John Dewey would ask them. And I said, what's that? How can you contribute to improving the health care of a community? And those students worked and wrote papers, and they were from engineering, arts and sciences, Wharton, and the college. And they were my class initially, but then worked with other faculty. And they designed a proposal, and they convinced the deans, and they began to work to develop a health center with the community. And in 2007, a federally qualified health center opened, supported by nursing, dentistry, arts and sciences. My class is a link to it. Medicine, dentistry, social policy, all working at that health center as part of a university-assisted community school. See that relationship, the undergraduates and the faculty, but what it also did is something we always believed and want, interdisciplinary work, where the faculties come together with the students to make a difference. Penn talks about one university, because all our schools and colleges exist on a campus, and the question is, that created one university. Working with the schools, the teachers, and the healthcare providers. So the issue of that is what we try to do deeply in 7 schools with 4,000 children and their family in West Philadelphia. And let me describe now and conclude with this, the attributes, I think, for community school development, and then some general points. I think we don't know the answers to this work in some ways, because we work on national adaptation all over the country. But the issue we've learned is it's all local, but there are certain principles. Every community is better than the other, and different from the other, and not as good as the other. So we have to learn together. Falls River and New Bedford are different from West Philadelphia and Falls River, and I'm sure New Bedford are different from each other. And no university is the same, but there are principles. And we've tried to develop this over 2 decades. First, there needs to be a central office on campus that coordinates university resources for the work to sustain. It must become integrated into the mission of the higher educational institution and not remain the effort of a few faculty members. Second, engagement across campus involves multiple schools and departments, not just one school and one department. 3, and this is for the principals in the room, a school principal who welcomes and encourages the partnership is crucial and conveys the philosophy to the faculty and staff of the school. Principals are the beginning and are the key often to keeping that going. A coordinator at each and every school site who is the link between the school and the community and the higher educational institution is key. And the coordinator can be an employee of the university, of the school, or from the community. You need to, otherwise it's work for the school and the teachers. You have to bring it together. Community school staff that are integrated into the school's operation are key. So the planning for and provision of supports for students, their families, and the community are as seamless as possible. That they're linked to the mission of the school, and parent community involvement, which was raised with me yesterday, is crucial and needs to become part of the fabric, including through advisory boards. Now, I want to make something very clear about this. We, and even the other schools that are doing this, from Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis University, Buffalo University of Maryland, Baltimore, Florida International University, where Davina Grossman's from, University of New Mexico, UCLA, Richard Stockton College, Johns Hopkins. We, Penn, is doing it the longest, and they, to some extent, have a very long way to go to fully mobilize the powerfully untapped resources of their own institutions, the communities, and the schools, including the resources of neighbors and agencies. Among other things, we'll have to better coordinate our work with public and private funding streams. Government is key, and that there are, through financial incentives and the bully pulpit, government needs to encourage community colleges, as was discussed, colleges and universities to do well by doing good. And that is to better realize their mission by contributing significantly to developing and sustaining democratic schools and communities. And now I will conclude. There's a noted psychologist at Penn by the name of Martin Seligman, who coined the term learned helplessness. And he wrote that in the 1960s to describe passive and defeatist attitudes and behaviors that result from repeated failure. It is a truism that overcoming feelings of learned helplessness among the poor and disadvantaged is crucial if their lives are to be made better. It should also be a truism that overcoming learned helplessness in our institutions of higher education is essential for solving schooling and educational problems. In recent, as I've discussed in recent years, learned engagement has developed among an increasing number of higher educational institutions through the development of university or higher ed assisted community schools. That engagement needs to be and must be both deeper, more significant, serious, and sustained, and wider, involving many more colleges and universities. Nonetheless, I think the recent history indicates the university-assisted community schools are at least a promising approach for effective and efficient school reform, pre-K through higher education. Now, Benjamin Franklin, to quote him again, founder of Penn, in 1789, stigmatized tradition-based barriers to progress as being rooted, and this is a wonderful phrase, in an unaccountable prejudice in favor of ancient customs and habitudes. Change doesn't happen because of ancient customs and habitudes. By working actively to develop university or higher ed assisted community schools, institutions of higher learning will be better able to advance learning, research, teaching, service, and learning, reduce ancient barriers and reduce those tradition barriers, those ancient customs and habitudes. That if they're engaged in working to develop university-assisted community schools, they will be better able to advance research, teaching, service, and learning, to reduce ancient customs and habitudes that impede university-school community partnerships. And if they do that, they will accomplish what I view as higher education's basic mission of helping American society more fully realize the democratic promise of America for each and for every American. Thank you very much.
Wow, very powerful. Now I'd like to invite questions from the audience.
You say that Penn has not, your center and Penn has not solved it all. What's the one thing that you really thought you would have achieved by now in this process that you haven't?
That's a wonderful question. So what have we achieved that we expected to achieve that we haven't? I think what we have achieved is more change at Penn, but I think the thing we haven't achieved is I would have hoped that we would have models or examples in which the schools would be 24-hour university-assisted community schools. And we believe we would create that, and that's partly through funding, not government funding, but we want the schools open 24/7. And we don't have that, and we also don't have this as much as a curricular thrust that we like, but that's partly because also government policies. The first one was, by this year, I thought we'd have seven, but at least some schools were open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 months a year, and we haven't had that yet.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
So as Matt mentioned, I am the assistant superintendent in the Fall River Public Schools. Prior to that, I was a professor at the Southern Connecticut State University and the University of Rhode Island, and my PhD is from Madison, University of Wisconsin-Madison, we say Madison. So this is an interesting talk for me because I see both sides.
Right.
So I see exactly what you're saying. And one of the reasons I left the university is because I wanted to make a difference, and I was not doing that at the university. So the question is, and I know my husband, Matt, is working very hard to change the culture at the university so it isn't an ivory tower, and it isn't that they know better necessarily, but that really they have a lot to learn from us and vice versa in the partnership. So the question is really, how do you change that culture at the university so that they understand that we are a place that they can learn from and a place to benefit from as well?
That's a great question. So what's to be done to change the university specifically? And I think that there are a few things to think about. One is you need to develop activities on campus that exemplify the work. So you need hard examples, real examples that sustain and continue. That's insufficient. You need, in fact, to indicate by the work, both on the ground and on campus, that it also produces better teaching and scholarship. But that's not sufficient. You need to connect. Now that wonderful phrase from the end of Howard's End, E.M. Foster's book, when he says, only connect. You have to connect to other places. You have to have colleagues and teachers talk together at different sites. We had a meeting that John Saltmarsh went to in the 20th anniversary of the Netter Center. And there were people, 500 people from about 80 colleges and universities from around the world, and with some community leaders connecting. You have to connect. And you have to be bold and make the claim, as you connect, that it's a better way, but we need to keep learning. Because the issue of the passivity, of not standing up and saying, the current emperor he or she, or Empress, he or she may not have no clothes, but the clothes aren't good enough. And we have to make that change. And I think the idea of working on the ground, having impacts on teaching, reading, learning, and service, those partnerships continue for years. That is, it's not just about doing a project, it's about a partnership, it's about working in a relationship, and then connecting those relationships across Massachusetts, this region, across Massachusetts, across New England, and across the United States. And that's what a number of people are working on, because it's a system change. But it only happens by example and making those connections. And I need help in figuring it out.
Thank you. Before we move into breakout sessions, which will be an opportunity for you to become much more active in the discussion, I want to point out a few folks that I think deserve some recognition. The first is a freshman student here at UMass-Dartmouth who's one of our Endeavor scholars, but also got himself and encouraged two of his classmates to become members of the Dartmouth Town Council recently. Jacob Miller, would you please stand up? These types of events just don't happen, right? And a lot of people do a lot of work in order to make this come to fruition. And so I would be remiss if I didn't mention some of these folks and express my gratitude and ask you to do the same. So the first is Lee Blake from Cusp. Lee, are you here? And then the entire staff of the Leduc Center, Deirdre Healy, Gary Martin, John Quinn. And the biggest round of applause has to go to Kate Jones so she can hear us. She's outside. What we've asked the folks who are leading us in discussions on these breakouts to do is to provide a brief overview, a summary of what they're doing, and then to allow for a significant discussion around that topic. So an opportunity for you to become involved in that discussion. We'll do that for 1 hour, and then we realize that you might actually want to take part in more than one of these discussions. So then we'll ask those discussion leaders to rewind with a different audience and give you an opportunity to move to different topics. So the way the room is situated is we have topic number 1 in that corner, topic number 2 in that corner, 3 and 6, which have been combined, are right here. And then on this side of the room, and I didn't put out these numbers, so I'm not positive where they're at. 4 is in that corner, and 5, I think, is in the middle, and 7 is in that. Breakouts, we'll have an informal kind of wrap-up with Dr. Harker. Thanks very much.
As well as I'm also the membership director of the New Bedford Area Chamber of Commerce. And for sake of the group, maybe if everybody could just go around, give your name and who you are and what you do.
I went in the building, I said to myself, first thing I can do is find that number 1, our parents were engaged in their kids' education. And number 2, they had finally found a voice to be able to tell them that's what they wanted for their children. So to have the partners bring that forth just began to change the dynamic of the school, because the assumptions were the parents didn't care, the kids didn't care. And that was just completely wrong. And the partners helped to really unfold that piece.
And part of that philosophy was really giving parents
was that universities, for the most part, said, wait a minute, we are the community. Let's just have college students work on campus, and then we'll have more, of our college jobs. Please feel free, Cape Cod Community College, please feel free to add in on
Well, I was
anything that I
just
said.
going to add that I found out when I talked to my financial aid office that they're still mandated to have a percentage in the community. So if you don't have enough work to do particular programs, you can go to financial aid and say, I know that you need to do some service work in the community. So I'd like to have a work study